I still remember the way the sun hit the hood of that car when I first saw it. The paint seemed to glow like it had been dipped in honey, the kind of shine that makes you imagine yourself pulling up to a stoplight and catching people's eyes. For weeks, I had been telling myself I needed something reliable, nothing fancy, just a car that would get me to work and back without hiccups. But when I walked past the rows of used vehicles at that small-town dealership, I felt my pulse quicken. It wasn't just reliable. It looked like freedom. I walked up and ran my hand along the fender, pretending to check for scratches, though really I just wanted to feel that cold metal under my fingertips. A salesman named Jerry approached me with a smile that felt a little too practiced. "Beautiful car, isn't it?" he said. "Yeah," I replied, trying not to look too eager. "How's it run?" "Like a dream," he promised, and then launched into his pitch about low mileage, one careful previous owner, and how they'd just done a full inspection. He kept throwing in phrases like, peace of mind, and no worries, the kind of words people use when they're trying to sell you something expensive. I wasn't naive. I knew salesmen had a way of making every lemon sound like a luxury ride, but something about the car just hooked me. Maybe it was the fact that I'd been saving for months, scraping together paychecks from my job at the time, eating more instant noodles than I care to admit, and finally, I was standing in front of something I could actually buy outright. After a test drive and a round of back and forth about paperwork, I signed my name more times than I could count and handed over my down payment. When Jerry slapped the folder shut and said, "Congratulations, Ms. Calvera," I couldn't help but smile. Yeah, that's my name, Zariah Calvera. Not the most common name, I know. It's one of those names that always makes people pause, tilt their head, and say something like, "That's unique. Where's it from?" I used to feel self-conscious about it, but over the years, I learned to own it. That day, sitting behind the wheel of my new car, I loved the way my name looked printed across the registration and contract. Zariah Calvera, car owner. It felt like a milestone. Driving off the lot, I had the windows rolled down, music turned up louder than usual, and the breeze tangling my hair. For the first time in a while, I felt like things were falling into place. But life has a way of humbling you when you least expect it. The first couple of weeks were great. The car ran smoothly, no issues, and I was starting to get used to the smell of the leather seats mixed with the faint hint of air freshener the dealership had probably sprayed before selling it to me. But then one afternoon, I walked out of the grocery store with my bags, pressed the unlock button, and nothing. The lights didn't blink. The locks didn't click. Confused, I tried again. Still nothing. I thought maybe it was the key fob battery, so I unlocked it manually and tried to start the car. Dead. Not even a sound. My stomach sank. I called the dealership, and after being passed around to 3 different people, I was told to have the car towed back there. "It's under our warranty, so don't worry," the woman on the phone said in a flat voice that didn't match the reassurance of her words. A couple of days later, I got the car back. They said it had been a minor battery issue, nothing serious, all fixed. I wanted to believe them. And for a few more days, I did. But then came the morning everything truly started to unravel. I was heading to work when I realized my car wasn't where I had parked it the night before. At first, I thought maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe I had parked on the next street over. I wandered up and down like an idiot, scanning each row of cars until it hit me. My car was gone. I called the police in a panic, thinking it had been stolen, but after I gave them the details, the officer said calmly, "It's not stolen. It's been repossessed." "Repos, what?" I stammered. "No, that's impossible. I bought it a month ago." "Well," the officer said, almost sounding bored, "the dealership filed it. You'll need to contact them." I hung up and immediately dialed the dealership. After a few minutes of tinny hold music, Jerry's voice came on. He sounded less friendly this time. "What do you mean you repossessed my car?" I demanded. "I've made every payment on time. I just bought it a month ago." He cleared his throat. "Well, Ms. Calvera, there were some issues with your financing paperwork. It seems there was a mistake on our end, but unfortunately, until it's sorted out, the vehicle can't remain in your possession." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. A mistake on your end? Then why am I being punished for it? That's just how the system works, he said smoothly, like he'd practiced that line 100 times. You're welcome to come in and discuss possible resolutions. I felt my blood boil. My car, the one I had scrimped and saved for, was sitting in their lot because of their so-called mistake. And they expected me to just sit quietly while they sorted it out? Not a chance. The next morning, I walked into that dealership like a storm cloud ready to burst. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to keep my chin up, to walk with the kind of confidence I didn't quite feel. The lobby smelled like burnt coffee and cheap air freshener, and behind the counter, Jerry sat with that same salesman smile plastered on his face. Ms. Calvera, he greeted me, as if we were old friends meeting for brunch instead of two people about to go to war. Please, have a seat. I didn't sit. Where's my car? I demanded. His smile faltered just a little. As I explained over the phone, there were discrepancies with your financing. There were no discrepancies with my financing, I snapped. I signed every paper you handed me, I paid every dollar you asked for, and I drove off this lot with a legally purchased car. Now it's gone, and you're telling me it's because of a mistake you made? Do you hear how insane that sounds? Jerry glanced nervously toward an office door, probably hoping his manager would come rescue him. Eventually, a tall man in a navy suit appeared. His tie just slightly loosened like he wanted to project authority without trying too hard. I'm Mr. Harlan, the manager, he said, extending his hand. I didn't shake it. Let's discuss this calmly in my office. His office was small, lined with certificates that looked like they'd been printed on cheap paper but framed to seem important. I sat down across from him, my fists clenched in my lap. Ms. Calvera, he began, I understand your frustration. But unfortunately, when our financing department identifies errors, we have to take immediate action. It's a liability issue. A liability issue? I repeated, incredulous. Your mistake is not my liability. You can't just take someone's car back a month after selling it. He steepled his fingers, the way people do when they're trying to look thoughtful. Technically, under the terms of the agreement. Oh, don't you dare technically me, I cut in. I know what I signed, and I know I've held up my end. You can spin it however you want, but this is theft. That got under his skin. His jaw tightened. Ma'am, I'd suggest you watch your language. If you'd like to continue doing business with us, we can explore new financing options. Otherwise, there's little more we can do. Doing business with you? I laughed, but it came out sharp, bitter. You expect me to hand you more money after you've already stolen what I gave you? No. Absolutely not. He sighed, like I was some petulant child. Then I'm afraid we're at an impasse. I left that office shaking with rage. By the time I got home, I was pacing my living room like a caged animal, venting to anyone who would listen. My best friend Camille came over that evening with takeout and a bottle of wine, and I unloaded everything on her between bites of lo mein. So let me get this straight, she said, eyebrows raised. You bought the car fair and square, they admitted it was their error, but they repossessed it anyway? Exactly. She shook her head. That's not just shady. That's criminal. You have to fight back. I've thought about a lawyer, I admitted. But you know how that goes. It's expensive, and the dealership probably has their own legal team. Camille leaned forward, lowering her voice like we were plotting a heist. Then don't fight fair. Fight smart. At first, I didn't know what she meant, but the idea stuck with me. Over the next week, every time I looked at the bus schedule or bummed a ride off a coworker, I thought about those smug faces at the dealership. The more I stewed, the more determined I became. I started researching. At first it was simple stuff. Consumer protection laws, stories of shady dealerships getting sued, forums where people vented about being ripped off. But then one night, buried deep in a thread, I stumbled across something that made my heart race. A commenter mentioned how some businesses forget to renew their registration with the state, leaving their names up for grabs. It's rare, the person had written, but if you're lucky enough to find it, you can essentially hold the name hostage. That little spark of possibility lit a fire in me. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Secretary of State's business registration portal. My fingers trembled as I typed in the dealership's name. The page loaded slowly, like it knew the weight of what it was about to reveal. And then there it was. Status: cancelled. I stared at the screen, my jaw slack. Could it really be this simple? Had they really been so careless? I barely slept that night, my brain buzzing with what this could mean. By morning, I had convinced myself it wasn't just possible. It was necessary. So I filed the paperwork. I registered the dealership's name under mine. When the confirmation email came through, I sat back in my chair and laughed. A laugh so loud my upstairs neighbor knocked on the floor to shut me up. Sorry, I shouted, grinning like a maniac. Camille came over again that evening, and when I showed her the confirmation, she nearly choked on her drink. Zariah, you're insane, she said, but her eyes were sparkling. Insane and brilliant. I'm not stopping there, I said. Tomorrow, I'm sending them a cease and desist. They can't use the name they've been running under since forever. It's mine now. Camille raised her glass. To sweet revenge. We clinked glasses, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the scales tipping back in my favor. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee, staring at the cease and desist letter I'd drafted the night before. I had copied the stiff, formal language from templates online, tweaking the details to fit my situation. The words unauthorized use of registered business name jumped off the page like a warning siren. I read it one more time, making sure it was sharp, professional, and intimidating. Then, with a grin I couldn't suppress, I hit print. The whir of my little inkjet printer never sounded so satisfying. After signing it with a flourish, I slipped it into an envelope, scrawled the dealership's address across the front, and marched it straight to the post office. As I dropped it in the outgoing bin, I whispered under my breath, "Checkmate." That night, I could barely contain myself. Camille called to check in, and I was pacing my living room, phone pressed to my ear. "They'll probably get it tomorrow," I said. "Maybe Friday at the latest." Can you imagine their faces when they realize they've been operating under a name they don't even own anymore? Camille laughed. "They'll choke on their stale coffee. You're like a one-woman wrecking crew." I slept better that night than I had in weeks. By Friday afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. For a second, I considered ignoring it, but something told me to pick up. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Ms. Calvera?" The voice was male, low, and strained, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd just discovered a fire in his living room. "This is Mr. Harlan from..." He stopped, clearly aware of the irony. "From our dealership. I believe you sent us a letter." I let a beat of silence hang in the air. "Yes," I said evenly. There was a pause, like he was waiting for me to soften, to offer him an out. When I didn't, he cleared his throat. "I think there's been some misunderstanding. Surely you didn't intend to interfere with our legal business operations." "Oh, but I did," I said sweetly. "Because you interfered with mine when you illegally repossessed my car." His tone sharpened. "That was a matter of financing protocol, not legality. If you're upset, I understand, but this is an extreme overreaction." "Extreme." I laughed, the sound sharp as glass. "Extreme is stealing someone's car after they've paid for it. Extreme is gaslighting me into thinking it's my fault. What I did was smart. What I did was legal. And now you can't use your own name without my permission." Silence. The kind that spoke louder than any words. Finally he exhaled, a hiss of frustration. "What do you want?" There it was. The sweet music of victory. "I want my money back," I said. "Every cent I gave you. And I want compensation for the trouble you've caused me. Otherwise, I'll make sure everyone knows your dealership is operating illegally under a name it doesn't own. You'll have regulators crawling all over you by Monday." He tried to recover, but his voice wavered. "That's blackmail." "No," I corrected calmly. "That's business." We went back and forth for nearly 20 minutes, his bluster fading with every passing second. By the end, his tone had shifted from defiant to resigned. "Fine," he muttered. "We'll cut you a check. But once this is settled, you release the name back to us." I considered it. Holding their name forever would be satisfying, but I wasn't trying to run a car dealership. I just wanted justice. "You have 48 hours, I said. "After that, I go public." When I hung up, I collapsed onto my couch, heart still racing. My hands shook as I texted Camille. He caved. "They're paying me back." Her reply came instantly. Queen behavior. Absolute queen. The next day, I walked into the dealership not as a victim, but as someone who had leveled the playing field. Mr. Harlan handed me a check, his face tight with forced politeness. Behind him, Jerry gave me a look that was equal parts awe and fear, like I'd sprouted wings and horns at the same time. I took the check, slipped it into my purse, and smiled. "Pleasure doing business with you." On my way out, I turned back and added, "By the way, maybe next time, treat your customers like people instead of numbers. You never know who's willing to fight back." The glass doors swung shut behind me, and the sun hit my face like a spotlight. For the first time in weeks, I felt free. I remember the drive home that day like it was a victory lap. My old sedan rattled down the road, but I didn't care. In my purse sat a check that symbolized so much more than money. It was proof that I hadn't been powerless. Proof that the little guy, or woman in this case, could fight back and win. When I pulled into my driveway, Camille was already waiting on the porch with 2 iced coffees in hand. She jumped up the second I stepped out of the car. "Well?" she demanded, practically bouncing. I pulled the check from my purse and held it up like a trophy. "Paid. In full." She screamed, grabbed me in a hug, and nearly spilled the drinks all over us. "You did it. Oh my God, Zariah, you actually did it." We collapsed onto the porch swing, and I filled her in on every detail. The tense phone call, the smug look on Harlan's face when he tried to play tough, the way his voice cracked when he realized I wasn't backing down. Camille laughed so hard at my impression of him that tears rolled down her cheeks. "You're a legend," she said, wiping her eyes. "This is going in the history books. Or at least the group chat." Sure enough, by that evening, word had spread through our circle of friends. My phone buzzed non-stop with messages. "Tell me how you pulled this off. You're insane, in the best way. Teach me your ways, Queen Z." It felt good. Not just because people were impressed, but because for weeks I'd felt humiliated, powerless, and angry. Now, I felt respected. Empowered. Like I'd taken back a piece of myself they'd tried to steal. The dealership, meanwhile, wasn't doing so hot. Over the next couple of weeks, I started hearing whispers. Their social media was flooded with comments, some from real people, some from, let's just say, motivated allies who enjoyed piling on once they caught wind of the story. Their Google reviews tanked. Rumors flew around town that they were scrambling to fix their reputation, even offering steep discounts just to lure people in. One night, I overheard 2 strangers at the grocery store talking near the cereal aisle. "Did you hear about that car lot over on Ashwood?" one said. Apparently some customer owned their name and sent them a cease and desist. Whole operation almost went under. I grabbed a box of Cheerios, hiding my smirk. That was me. They were talking about me. Of course, I didn't want to hold on to their name forever. I had no interest in becoming the accidental owner of a car dealership brand. After a few weeks, once I was satisfied they'd learned their lesson and I had every cent back in my account, I released the registration. It felt like the final chess move, putting the king in checkmate, then walking away from the board. Life settled down after that. I went back to work, back to my routines, but I wasn't the same. There was a new steadiness in me, a confidence I hadn't had before. One evening, over dinner at my parents' house, my dad asked, "So, what did you take away from all this? Besides the money, I mean." I thought about it for a moment. That you can't always stop people from screwing you over. But you can decide how you respond. You can either take it lying down, or you can find a way to fight smart. He nodded, smiling. That's my girl. And he was right. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about standing up for myself when someone tried to push me down. It was about refusing to let arrogance and greed have the last word. Even now, whenever I drive past a shiny new car lot, I remember how close I came to letting myself be a victim, and how satisfying it felt to flip the script instead. I may not have walked away with a new car, but I walked away with something far better. The knowledge that even an ordinary woman, with nothing but persistence, a laptop, and a little creativity, could take on a business and win. And that's a kind of horsepower no dealership can sell.